Hey everybody, welcome back. And today we're going to continue our video series on the top 10 things you need to know before getting your VA home loan. And today we're going to continue on with video number 3 of this series. And this is often brought up all the time. What is the minimum credit score that you need for a VA home loan? Hey guys, Aaron Dehart back with you again. Hey, if you haven't already, please give us a like, hit that subscribe button so we can continue to come out with great information that the public's going to get, and you can be notified whenever we come out with more helpful information on the home buying process. So guys, let's get right into it today. Again, on the VA home loans, so a lot of times people get confused and they think that it's the VA that is actually issuing you the funds or is actually giving you the VA loan. That's not the case at all. The VA only insures the lender that is giving you those funds. So let me say that again. VA does not make home loans. They only insure the lender that is issuing their funds. So what is the VA minimum credit score? Guess what? The VA doesn't have one. They actually let the lenders set their standard for what they want their minimum credit score requirements to be. Now, be forewarned, if you are out there and you hear something like, hey, you need a minimum 640 credit score, you need a minimum 620 credit score, whatever that number is to get your VA loan, that's not the case. That's actually what's called a lender overlay. And what that means is that lender says, hey, we've only got this much risk threshold that we want to get involved with on our VA loans. So some lenders might say, we won't go any lower than a 640 credit score. We might not go any lower than a 600 credit score, or we might not go any lower than a 580 score. So again, it all depends with the lender. Now, we do have a lender that will actually go down to as low as a 500 credit score. However, it is a case-by-case basis. So a lot of things need to happen, and a lot of times they might not allow 100% financing. So again, with that particular scenario, it's going to be a case-by-case scenario. So we have to look at the complete file, get all your documents, put it together, review it with that underwriter, and have a discussion on how that needs to be structured. Now, the majority of VA loans, if you've got strong enough of a file, you can go down to still a 580 credit score without having to put any money down. Now, if you remember on previous videos in this series, there are a couple caveats. We want to make sure that you have your full eligibility. And if you remember from before, video number 1, the most important thing in regards to eligibility is we need to get your certificate of eligibility or your COE first, because that gives us all of that information that we need to see if you're even eligible to, 1, get the VA loan, and 2, if you have enough entitlement that we don't have to put any money down. Very, very important. So before you do anything else, you want to get your certificate of eligibility. The best case to do that, the easiest way to do that, is to actually have your lender get the certificate of eligibility for you. Now, with VA loans, again, there's no minimum credit score, but like I mentioned earlier, it's going to depend on some lenders are not going to have as strong as an appetite. It all depends. Our specialty is VA loans. It's about 70% of the loans we do every single month. So we made sure it was important that we have an array of different underwriters that we can have discussions with for different scenarios. Everybody's different. Now, here's what's really cool about VA loans. Even if you've had some credit hiccups in the past, VA does not care about it. As a matter of fact, VA is going to look more closely at our last 1 or 2 years of what's going on with our credit. So let's take a look at that real quick. So let's say, for example, 3 or 4 years ago, some bad things happened. It happens in life. It's life. We're all human beings. And you might have defaulted on some credit cards or gone into some collections or things like that. VA is not going to beat you up about that. Again, we're going to look at the last 12 to 24 months more closely in regards to credit. So let's take a look at some things on VA and what they look at specifically when it comes to credit. So does your credit score matter on a VA loan? No, not really. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a case-by-case basis. Now, here's something to keep in mind. The better your credit score is, the more options you're gonna have, okay? So if you have a higher credit score, you're gonna get better pricing. You're also going to not have to typically get as much documentation. Again, what we're looking for, every single loan has to be ran through what's called an automated underwriting engine. We use, which both is called desktop underwriting, or DU, or LP, which is short for loan prospector. And what we're looking for is what's called an approved, eligible, or an accept on a VA loan. If we get an approved, eligible, or an accept, it's a lot less documentation that we have to get for your VA loan to get finalized and get final loan approval and get it to the closing table and the finish line. The higher your credit score is, the more likely we're going to get that approved eligible. Now with VA loans, they're one of the most liberal programs out there when it comes to credit. So we can actually do what's called VA manual underwrites. And all that is it's like how every single loan had to be underwritten back in the day. Like back in the 1970s and 1980s. They didn't have the computer algorithm yet to do a pre-underwrite on the file and tell us what needed to go get in the file. So even if you've had some credit hiccups or some credit issues in the past, we can still look at getting you a VA loan. So if you've been told no somewhere else, or hey, you have to have at least a 620 credit score, talk to us. We want to take a look at that file because there's a good chance we can probably do a VA manual underwrite for you. As a matter of fact, about 1 out of 5, maybe 1 out of 6 VA loans are manual underwrites, and they get to the closing table no problem at all. It's just a little bit more elbow grease, a little bit more documentation that we have to work on with you getting, and no problem at all. Now, like we mentioned earlier, VA loans has some of the more liberal underwriting guidelines and make sense guidelines when it comes to your credit history. Again, we're just looking more closely at the last 1 or 2 years. So let's take a look at something. Hey, Aaron, I had a bankruptcy 4 years ago. Guess what? Here's something that's really, really neat. VA loans are very liberal when it comes to bankruptcy. As a matter of fact, you can get a VA loan with a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy is when the bankruptcy court wipes out all your debt. You're starting over again from zero. You are actually eligible to get a VA loan 2 years after the Chapter 7 discharge date. Again, this is a discharge date, not the filing date. It's the date that the court says, hey, this is discharged, you're done. 2 years after that date, you can actually be eligible to get a VA loan. If you do a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, where you're actually agreed to go into a repayment plan with the creditors, you can actually be eligible for a VA loan just 12 months after that Chapter 13 discharge date. So keep that in mind. If you've had a bankruptcy on a VA loan, if it's a Chapter 7, it's 2 years from your discharge date, and if it's Chapter 13, you can be eligible just 1 year after your Chapter 13 date. So what if you had a foreclosure? Again, this is something that's really neat with VA. With VA, you can get a home loan within just 2 years of having a foreclosure. So what about if you've had a foreclosure before? Again, pretty cool. VA is very liberal with this. The waiting period for a VA loan after you've had a foreclosure is just 2 years. So 2 years from the discharge date of your foreclosure, you can actually be eligible to use your VA loan. Now, here's something to keep in mind. And again, super important. If you notice, I keep going back to that certificate of eligibility. If you had a foreclosure on a previous VA loan, that does not necessarily mean that you can never not get a VA loan again. We have to get that information because it's going to show us your history on any previous VA loans. If you had a foreclosure, we have to look at how much of your entitlement was used up on that previous VA loan. There's a calculation we're required to do. It'll then tell us what your maximum loan amount is that you can get without having to put a down payment on your new VA loan. So again, if anybody ever tells you, oh, you had a VA loan before and you foreclosed on it, you can never get a VA loan again, please give us a call because that's not true at all. Again, get your certificate of eligibility. What if you had a short sale where you weren't quite going to foreclose on it, but the bank went ahead and agreed and they said, okay, we're going to let you sell the house for less than the amount that is owed on the property. Again, that wait time is just 2 years from your short sale date. So again, if it was a prior or previous VA loan that you had to do a short sale on, we need to get that certificate of eligibility to get that information so we can properly do our calculations to let you know how much you qualify for on a new VA loan without having to put any money down. So guys, as you can see with VA loans, again, they don't really have a minimum credit score, guys. If you start getting below the 580 credit score, it's going to start being a case-by-case basis. So it's important to have a good conversation with the lender. Leave everything out on the table, guys. Get your actual credit report pulled. It does not really hurt your credit that much to get an actual credit report pulled. Credit Karma does not count. We have to use our own credit report to do that. That way we can give you a full analysis of what needs to be done. Here's another thing too to keep in mind. If you haven't watched my previous video on credit, you can check that out on all the ways to improve your credit and help you get that perfect credit score over time. What we do is we'll actually look at that credit report, do an analysis for you guys, and a lot of times we can get you 20, 30, 40, 50, heck, I've even seen 70, 80 points in just a matter of a month or so by some things that we can do, paying down credit card balances, some other things like that. There could be some things on your credit report that shouldn't be on there anymore that are still reporting, which we can have legally removed because they're past the time frames that they're legally allowed to be on there. We see it all the time. So guys, at the end of the day, the moral of the story is you don't know unless you know. Have a good talk with a lender that does a lot of VA loans like we do, where we can actually analyze your credit, go through it, do some credit scenarios, go through your time frames, and give you the best options for you. Again, it's always best to have the highest credit you can, but just because you've had some hiccups in the past, don't let that keep you from being able to apply for your VA loan and look at using your VA loan to obtain a property. Guys, thanks for watching. Again, if you haven't already, please give us a like, subscribe, give us a comment below, and if you know of someone who could use this information, we'd really appreciate it if you'd share it with them. Guys, stay tuned next week for video number 4 in our series of the top 10 things you need to know before getting your VA home loan. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.